Claustrophobia in children. Demystifying the fear of enclosed spaces.
Why does a closed elevator or a tiny room send some kids into panic? Claustrophobia isn't one fear, it's two. If you've ever stood there feeling totally helpless while your child just freezes in absolute terror at the sight of elevator doors closing, you know exactly how incredibly stressful this reality is. But hey, you're not alone, and there's actually a very clear mechanism driving this panic.
Section 1. The 2 Hidden Fears. Okay, let's dive into this. Because what looks like a single phobia to us on the outside is actually understood by clinical psychologists as a two-factor model. When a child steps into an enclosed space, their brain is suddenly, and I mean completely, assaulted by two distinct, overwhelming fears all at once. It's the fear of suffocation and the fear of restriction. So the suffocation factor, that's triggered by a perceived lack of ventilation, right? The terrifying feeling that the air is just going to run out. And the restriction factor is triggered by the sheer physical reality of a closed door with absolutely no immediate exit. An elevator, by its very design, triggers both of these internal alarms at the exact same time.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact catastrophic internal thoughts fueling your child's terror. Look, they aren't afraid of the metal box itself. No way. They're terrified of what their brain is telling them is going to happen inside that box. These thoughts, I can't breathe and I can't get out, are incredibly, literally real to them in that moment. The fear isn't logical at all, it's completely visceral. And changing those specific catastrophic cognitions is absolutely crucial to reducing the fear.
Section 2. What the research shows. Let's look at the science behind this.
Now I want to be totally transparent here. Highly specific, dedicated research strictly looking at children in elevators? It's surprisingly thin. However, research on claustrophobia in general shows we must lean on situational specific phobia evidence. What we do is extrapolate from really robust adult research and incredibly well-mapped data on general childhood phobias to figure out exactly how to tackle this. And from that general data, we know that 5 to 10% of children experience a specific phobia that impacts their daily functioning. I really bring this up to reassure you. If your child is struggling with this, listen. You haven't done anything wrong, and your child is perfectly normal. This is a super common, well-documented psychological hurdle, and, more importantly, it is highly treatable. For kids dealing with specific situational phobias like this, the absolute strongest pediatric treatment anchor we have is something called one-session treatment, or OST. Instead of dragging therapy out over weeks or months, OST actually condenses the core principles of cognitive behavioral therapy into an initial assessment, which is then followed by a single, highly focused exposure session that can last up to 3 hours.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the result of a massive national randomized controlled trial known as the ASPECT trial. Researchers compared this brief one-session treatment against traditional multi-session cognitive behavioral therapy in nearly 300 children. And the finding? It's huge. OST is clinically equivalent to multi-session CBT. The kids experience the exact same reduction in fear, the exact same improvements in quality of life, but in a fraction of the time. Honestly, this is a real game changer for families who just don't have the time or resources for months of weekly appointments.
Section 3. Graduated exposure and OST. So, how do we actually do this? The real engine driving these treatments is graduated exposure, paired up with very specific coping skills. Basically, this means slowly, safely introducing the child to the feared situation. That could be en vivo, meaning in real life, or even through modern VR protocols built specifically to simulate enclosed spaces. But it's not just about tossing them in a room, right? It's about combining that physical exposure with physical grounding, like slow breathing techniques. And most importantly, actively shifting those catastrophic thoughts we talked about earlier.
You know, when a child panics, our first parental instinct is just simple reassurance. You're okay. You're fine. Don't worry about it. But research actually shows that reassurance-only messaging isn't all that effective. Instead, you need to shift to a predictability message. You want to directly counter their fear of restriction by stating it plainly. We can always get out. You're essentially replacing the catastrophic unknown with a predictable, guaranteed exit strategy.
Section 4. The elevator ladder. Let's make this highly practical. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual graduated sequence. Step 1 is incredibly low stakes. You just stand near a stopped elevator. That's it. You practice those slow breathing techniques right there in the lobby. Once their anxiety drops, you move to step 2. You write exactly one stop with a calm adult, and you ensure the door reopens almost immediately. This completely proves the predictability message. We can always get out. Once they master that without their anxiety spiking, then you move to step 3, taking longer rides. It's a slow, methodical climb up the ladder at their own pace.
Section 5. When to seek help.
So the crucial point is looking out for these two signs: persistent avoidance and daily impairment. If your child is constantly rearranging their life, and let's face it, your family's life, just to avoid elevators, or if the fear is severe enough to cause daily disruptions, missing activities, or extreme ongoing distress, well, that's when an enclosed space fear warrants a professional assessment. But remember, this is incredibly common and highly treatable with the right exposure therapy.
By understanding the hidden fears of suffocation and restriction, using predictability instead of just empty reassurance, and taking small, graduated steps, you really can help your child take their life back from panic. So what small step could you and your child take together today to turn the unknown into the predictable? Fear Me Not helps kids conquer fears through play.